you guys, Flickers of Fear time. I cannot believe it took me so goddamn long to get around to doing this movie. Holy shit. But yeah, anyway, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a pretty big fan of Jim Jarmusch. Not like a super fan or anything like that. You know, I haven't seen every single one of his movies, but I've seen like a good portion of them. And I'm like a really big fan of his kind of droll, philosophical, laid back hangout type of movie vibe. Sometimes more successful than others, but because recently, well, not that recently, I guess it was like a couple years ago, but we did actually end up seeing The Dead Don't Die. And we actually saw that in the theater a couple of times, because I know a lot of people really didn't like that one because they kind of thought maybe the humor didn't work or something like that. For some reason, it just like fucking tickled me. I just like really, really liked it a lot. So I ended up seeing, like I said, a couple times in the theater. And, you know, seeing that as that was like Jim Jarmusch's take on the zombie genre, using zombies to like kind of sort of like portray like a larger message. So obviously I knew that he had done a vampire movie back in 2013 called Only Lovers Left Alive. And I have had so many people like over the years recommend it to me. And like I said, I was like, I promise I'll get around to it. I promise I'll get around to it. But since so finally, you know, it's on Amazon Prime. So I was like, okay, God damn it. I'm just going to like sit down and watch this fucking movie. And like I said, why the fuck did I wait so long to see this movie? Because this movie is delightful. I really, really liked it. I actually really liked this. I like this more than The Dead Don't Die, and I actually quite liked The Dead Don't Die a lot. But this is kind of like a different vibe. This is not, if you've seen it, you know that this is not a horror movie. It's kind of more, even though it's about vampires, it's kind of more like a drama, black comedy, but it's very, very dry. Like I said, it's very philosophical. Like it has kind of a lot to say about immortality, about different attitudes toward life, but it's not really, I mean, there's blood drinking and stuff in it, but it's not really like a horror movie. So don't go into it like thinking it's going to be that. Because like I said, if you know anything about Jim Jarmusch, he doesn't really, you know, make movies the way other people make them. So it's kind of like, you know, that you're going to expect something unexpected, I guess, or you're going to like, you know, even if he's taking a genre that, you know, like zombie movies or something like that, he's not going to do like the same shit with it that some normal person would do, is, you know what I'm saying? So what you have here is there are two vampires. They're a married couple, Adam and Eve. Now, Adam is played by Tom Hiddleston, although I believe that Michael Fassbender was originally supposed to play him, but then he ended up not being able to do it for whatever reason. So Tom Hiddleston took the role instead, and Tilda Swinton plays Eve. Now, these two, I don't think they ever say how old each of them are. The implication being that Eve apparently is much, much older than Adam, but Adam is at least like a few centuries old. I kind of more got the impression that Eve was maybe like 1,000 years old or maybe like a little bit older. So, but you know, it's not super important, but it is kind of important to the dynamic that Eve is like much older than Adam is, even though they're both quite old. There are also a couple of other characters. John Hurt is in this briefly. He plays, and I don't think this is, because like I said, this came out in 2013, and I don't think it's the kind of movie that you know, is like spoiler, like it's like, oh my God, why'd you tell me what happened? Because it's not all of that plot driven. Like stuff happens in it, but it's more, like I said, like a hangout movie, like a kind of character study, philosophical type movie. So it's not like, oh my God, there was this big like spoiler, like surprise that I spoiled for you or anything like that. So John Hurt is in it, and he actually plays Christopher Marlowe, which, if you know anything about, you know, English literature or anything like that, there is a theory going around. I don't know how I feel about it one way or the other, but that Christopher Marlowe was actually the guy that wrote all of Shakespeare's plays, which they actually do posit is true in this movie. So he's been around a long time too, and he's just kind of like, you know, Shakespeare was like a hack, and it's like, I got all the, you know, he got all the credit, and it's like, I was the one that did all the work and blah, blah, blah. So there's that whole issue. So basically what you have, Adam and Eve have been married a very long time, still very much in love. They don't live together most of the time. He was actually some kind of like legendary rock star at some point. You're led to believe maybe 50s, 60s, or maybe he's been a musician for a very long time, because they make a reference at some point in the movie that he had written like some of Schubert's stuff, like, you know, I just gave him the Adagio and stuff like that. So he's been a musician for a long time, but he's apparently some kind of like reclusive rock star that was like super famous, because at some points you kind of see like these sort of like rock and roll fanboys like kind of hang, like they've heard this rumor that he's like this reclusive, that he still lives in this place, and they're kind of like hanging around, like, you know, hoping to get a glimpse of him or whatever. But because he's a vampire and he's immortal, obviously, he kind of tries to stay out of the limelight. So he's been living in Detroit, in this neighborhood that's just basically kind of like empty. So he's been living in this kind of like empty building, and he's rigged up his own electricity from technology he picked up from Nikola Tesla, who he knew in real life, because like I said, he's been alive for hundreds of years. And he is very much, Adam's character is very much mired in the past. He likes to collect old musical instruments. He has a human sort of friend, I guess you would call it, or, you know, overseer or somebody like that. But I don't think his friend, whose name is Ian, who's played by the late Anton Yelkin, I don't think he knows that that Adam is a vampire, but he just knows that he's this reclusive rock star rich dude that gives him like big wads of cash to go and find things for him. So he brings him like all these guitars, and he like knows when all of them are from, and he seems to like to collect ones from the 60s. And all of the equipment, like he has all this audio equipment in his house, and it's all old. He's a very analog type of dude. And even though he sort of has a computer, he has it sort of like rigged up where it goes like into like this really, really old like television set. Like, so he has all this stuff like rigged up. Like I said, he's a very analog type of dude, but he's also very much kind of like a tragic romantic type of figure, where he basically thinks that humans have essentially destroyed the world. Humanity is circling the drain. You know, everything is terrible. So he's very much looking back to the past as kind of like a golden era, and he doesn't think it's going to come again. And so he's even got to a point now where, even though he still writes his music and he still seems to enjoy it, it's like it doesn't really seem to be enough to like get him to keep going. So at some point near the beginning of the movie, he actually gives a bunch of money to Ian, his friend, and said, I want a wooden bullet, like with a brass casing, but he's like, you know, I want wooden inside, like the hardest wood that you can. He just wants one of them. So, you know, you're led to believe that he's thinking about, you know, he's contemplating suicide because he can't really see that things are going to get any better. He doesn't really get any enjoyment out of life anymore. You know, he's been around for hundreds of years. He's kind of sick of it. He's over it, and all this other kind of shit. Now, contrasted with that is his wife, Eve, who's played by Tilda Swinton. Now, she has been around a lot longer than him, so perhaps has more of like a long view, or like a longer perspective on history. So she's seen things go into decline, but she's also seen things like come back, and she's seen like a lot more progress, I guess. She's seen a lot more history than he has. So she has a very kind of like Zen, a more positive view. She's living in Tangier, and she seems to still find great joy in music and art and reading and things like that, particularly in books, because they show her many times like her whole house is just like stacks and stacks of books, and she can like speed read, so she reads everything very quickly. She can read every language, so, you know, and she seems to take great delight in reading and discovering new things. One thing I like too is that she seems very, even though she likes a lot of old things, she also like keeps up with the times. Like she packs all these books, and it's like she has old ones, she has new ones, and it's like really cool because she doesn't have the same thing that Adam has, where he's just kind of like, you know, oh, nothing's good anymore. You know what I mean? He's kind of like one of those grumpy, like pessimistic. It's like, oh, everything sucks now, blah, blah, blah. He's one of those kind of guys. Whereas she's a lot more a lot more zen about it, where she's just kind of like, history is cyclical, things decline, but things also come back. There's always beautiful things through every time period. You just have to know where to find them. So she has a lot healthier attitude toward immortality than Adam does. But as I said, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, and they complement each other. And even after however many 100 years they've been together, they're still like very, very much in love. So they have a discussion near the beginning. Like I said, she's in Tangier and he's in Detroit, and they talk to each other like she has like an iPhone and everything, and he has his rigged up like TV, this good, cranky old computer and stuff. And so they're talking to each other, and she begins to sense that maybe he's in a depressive episode, which she implies has happened before. So she says, I'm going to fly out there and see you, and and I'll try and cheer you up, essentially. So she comes there. At that point, there's kind of like I said, why I call this like a hangout movie is just because for a lot of the movie, which I think is about 2 hours long, I wasn't really looking at the time. Like, I wasn't bored or anything, but it is like a languidly paced, let's call it that. But like I said, it's kind of like a hangout movie. So they kind of, she comes to Detroit. She thinks it's, even though obviously it's Detroit and there's like nobody around and everything's like ruins and everything, but she still finds a lot of beauty in it and like thinks it's delightful. And she's like just interested in everything. And he's just kind of like, he kind of is to an extent, but he's always more like, oh, well, they tore this down and now it's this, and it was so much better before, and it was like all this other kind of stuff. So there's a while where they're just kind of like talking, just being together to, talking about philosophical stuff. He's very, very into science. He knew, like I said, Nikola Tesla, he knew Einstein, he knew, a lot of, scientists from the old days, like maybe Isaac Newton and stuff like that. I don't remember if he had that, if he knew him or not. But so he's very into that. So he's always kind of talking about different scientific theories. But again, that's another thing where he's, reeled down like, negativity, because he's like, look at what they did to all the great scientists over the ages, Galileo and Copernicus and everybody like that. They were just like persecuted or something like that, or they're still bitching about Darwin, like he says at some point. So he's like, look at what these humans, he calls humans zombies. He's like, look at what they've done to like their best and brightest. And it's just like, I don't think it's going to get any better. So into this situation where they're just kind of hanging out, and she kind of, Eve kind of twigs onto the fact that he has actually purchased a bullet, which he's contemplating using to commit suicide, and that upsets her a great deal. So into this comes Eve's sister, Ava. Now, Ava is essentially like the element of chaos that's introduced into the movie. She is also quite old, but she is essentially like the vampire party girl, right? It's like she just wants to go out all the time and like listen to bands and all this other kind of shit. Now, I should note too that Adam and Eve, even though they are vampires, it's implied that they don't attack and kill people anymore, because what Adam does is he just goes to the local hospital and he just has this doctor who's like a friend of his who he bribes to give him like fresh blood from the hospital. Whereas Eve in Tangier, she has Christopher Marlowe, played by John Hurt, who has a supplier, like, a French doctor that can get them like really good blood. Because I think they're worried that, I think Adam more than Eve, that because the planet or humans are so polluted, that their blood is also polluted, and that it's better to just get it from like a hospital or like a reputable source. So they don't actually kill people and drink their blood. However, Ava seems more open to this possibility. Like I said, she's more like a party girl. She's almost like a drug addict, but like with blood. So she can't really like control her craving for it. So she turns up, and there's some implication that the last time she came to visit them, which was 87 years ago, I think they say in the film, that something really bad happened, although they never really, go too much into what that was. So she comes there, she's very like kind of, we need to go out, we need to do this, that, and the other. And so finally she gets them to go someplace, and it doesn't end up in a very good place. Like I said, I kind of don't know if I want to spoil that aspect of the plot, but something bad happens. that she causes, at which point Adam is just like, yeah, no, she needs to get the fuck out of here. So there's that whole thing. So as the movie goes on, like I said, there comes a point where Adam can't really hide his location anymore because all of these fans keep coming there, and he really doesn't want that because he wants to remain reclusive. So eventually they say, okay, we're just going to leave everything. You're going to leave all your shit here, and we're going to go back to Tangier because she's like, it's beautiful there. You used to love it. It'll be like we're starting over. But then when they get back, there's another problem with their blood supply, where it's coming from. And so they start to contemplate at the end of the film that they might actually have to start drinking blood from humans again because their blood supply source is running out. As I said, this is not a horror movie, but there was just something about the vibe of this movie. It's just like, I really, really loved. It's very, very gothic. It almost kind of like, in the best possible sense, where it's almost kind of, it gave me the same kind of feeling that the 1983 movie The Hunger gave me, where it's just kind of like you just want to live in that world, because it's just this kind of like tragic romanticism type of vibe. And I really, really like vampire movies that are like that. I also like this one because, like I said, it's not a horror movie. It's not gory or anything like that. They do show them kind of drinking blood, but they just drink them out of the wine and everything. It's kind of like your classic, proto Anne Rice type of thing where, he's super into like Edgar Allan Poe and all this other kind of stuff. And he's just like, oh, woe is me type of thing. But then she's kind of a lot more, as I said, optimistic about it, optimistic about the future. It's like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, yeah, things suck sometimes, but things come back. I see things bounce back. And she even, when she first comes to Detroit, he just sees it as this kind of, ruin. But that's what he likes about it, is that everything is in the past and he just wants to wallow in the past. And she says, yes, but, it will bounce back. It's coming back already. See, and she points out different things. So it's kind of like exploring the differences between people who are more invested in the past, and even if that past is not what happened, like it's kind of like looking back to some fictitious like golden era, and these types of people like in the modern day, like nowadays, like seem to be like really miserable because they always think, oh, it was better way back when, whenever way back when was. So they're kind of exploring the relationship between a person like that and a person who is maybe more, like I said, emotionally healthy, in the sense that they have like a longer view of history and they know that things will like bounce back even if, things seem like they suck right now. And it's just interesting that he explored that theme through two characters who are vampires and who are immortal and who have literally been able to see all of these historical things happen because they were literally there. So he's using the trope of the vampire being immortal to sort of like explore the idea between different types of humans and different types of ways of looking at the past, the present, and the future, which I thought, like, the more I think about it, like, the more brilliant this movie fucking seems. Like I said, it has a plot in the sense that like things happen and the characters do change over the course of the movie, but it's not like a real plot driven narrative. You know what I mean? So don't go into it expecting that. It's more like a philosophical musings on humanity, and different views of history, I guess, history progress, but seen through the eyes of beings who were actually there, so who maybe have a different perspective on it than a human would. And it's, it's kind of like this really cool, I saw this one review of it where she was pointing out that Adam and Eve were kind of like, were like yin yang, you know what I mean? And they just kind of like fit together perfectly, because even though they have very different ways of looking at the world and looking at the, taking the long view of history and stuff, they still like complement one another and they're still very much in love with one another, which I thought was like a really cool exploration. There's also a really lot of great music in this. There's a lot of great like literary references if you're into that, which I am, but it's done in a way that's not pretentious, because even though these two characters, knew all of these literary figures, knew all these you know, classical musicians, knew all these writers, knew all of these people, and are really into it. They're not like snotty about it. Even Adam's character, who kind of looks down on humans, like I said, he calls them zombies and like, you know, they're ruining everything type of thing. But even then, he doesn't come across as like a hipster douche or anything like that. He just comes across as kind of just like a sad, like tragic figure, because, you know, it's not kind of a case where he just thinks he's better or anything like that. So I think that it's good that the characters are just so likable, even though on paper it maybe seems like they wouldn't be, because it seems like, oh my God, they'd be like so insufferable and stuff. But they really don't come across that way. They come across like very genuine, you know, just likable characters. And this movie is also quite funny, like in that Jim Jarmusch, like very dry kind of way, which I really dig that. You know, I was just laughing at like just little shit, like her having like making blood popsicles and her being like all excited about it and stuff like that. It's not like zany or wacky. It's not even, I don't even know if I'd call it a comedy. It's sort of a dark comedy in the sense that there's funny stuff in it, but it's essentially, I'm not even sure what I'd call it. It's kind of like a drama, but I don't know. It's not even really that either, because that seems also kind of a reductive term. I guess most of Jim Jarmusch's movies are kind of hard to classify. So this is another one that's like that. It definitely has elements of drama. It has elements of, you know, horror, even a little bit. It has elements of a comedy, but it's not really any of those things. And like trying to put it into one genre is really doing it a disservice. But yeah, this was like, I just really thought this movie was like, I don't know if fun is the exact word. I guess it sort of is. It is a fun movie. It's just kind of one of those lay back on a Saturday night and like kind of get some booze or whatever, smoke some weed or whatever, and just like chill out and like watch it and just be like, yeah, man, it's just like one of those kind of movies, light some candles and shit. And it's like, and I really like those kind of movies. You have to be in the mood for them. But this one was definitely kind of ticked all the boxes of like stuff that I really like. Because like I said, I'm not a giant fan, I have to say, of vampire movies in general, especially like kind of newer ones, but even older ones. I'm just kind of like, vampire's not really my favorite monster, but I just like that they were vampires in this for a reason of exploring, you know, taking, like I said, looking at history and progress through the lens of people that were actually there, like looking into mortality, immortality. So saying things about humans by, you know, using the trope of immortal beings and not human. So I thought that was like actually really cool. So like I said, this came out in 2013. If you're into Jim Jarmusch and you haven't seen this one, this is definitely, I mean, he's got a lot of good ones, but man, this one was like really good. I really liked this a lot. It's just like the whole vibe of it. I just really dug it. And so yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's on Amazon Prime. I'm sure it's, you know, if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can watch it for free. I think you can watch it, like you can rent it on YouTube and shit like that too, I'm sure. But yeah, you should definitely check it out if you like vampire movies, if you like these kind of like weird indie kind of stuff, because I feel like it took a really long time for this to get made, like because he couldn't get financing. And I guess I was reading that it took him like 7 years before they got it made or something like that. And then finally, like, there was a German production company that gave him some of the money, and then, you know, so he finally got around to making it. But it seems like it got really good. You know what, I don't think I've seen a negative review of this, you know, because it's just, like I said, if you know what you're getting into, it's a really entertaining movie. And it's just, and Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston, who's hot as shit in this, by the way, actually, I mean, they both are, but they really like play off each other really well. So like the acting is like really great. And it's, you know, it's just like a really fun, entertaining, just hangout type of movie, like hang out with some weed and light some candles and shit like that type of movie. But yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't seen it, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.